19th staging of the Pirelli Portuguese round, held twice in Estoril, including the championship's inaugural campaign, but aside from a single season sabbatical and ever present on the calendar since moving to the Algarve International Circuit in 2008. A popular destination for riders and fans thanks to the relaxed beachside host, Portimao. Set into the hills north of the town, the roller coaster earns its name from its mammoth elevation changes. Most famously, the iconic 696-metre long start-finish straight with its 12% downhill slope. Brief look back to the best of the action from 2024, and this long straight is where Toprak Razgatlioglu made all three of his race-winning overtakes yesterday. As well, hit the front for the last time into turn 3, the next overtaking hotspot, the slowest corner of the circuit, where he also won race 2 earlier on. Alvaro Bautista should have won in Portimao a year ago. His attempt to pass Razgatlioglu into turn 5 ultimately coming unstuck. Those 3 heaviest braking zones in the opening 5 corners, seeing almost all of the overtaking here. But turns 10 and 11, as the track opens up and climbs, are at least wide enough for a block pass. And Toprak Razgatlioglu made his first move on Nicolo Bulliga into turn 13 yesterday. Those are the main overtaking hotspots. Toprak Razgatlioglu, your lap record holder, after a superb display in the Superpole race earlier on. Back-to-back wins for Toprak Razgatlioglu. His Superpole race victory this morning was his 20th win for BMW and a 59th in the championship, with which he equals Carl Fogarty. Toprak Razgatlioglu, who posted his last hat-trick here in Portimao in August, is chasing his first unbeaten weekend of 2025 and the 7th of his career. 2 clear rivals for race 2 of the 2025 Pirelli Portuguese round, already first and second in the standings. 5 races into the series, and 3 of them so far have seen Razgatlioglu and Bulliga on the top 2 steps of the podium. But Steve English alongside me, the main story ahead of this afternoon is our change to the lineup, with Alvaro Bautista up from 9th to 3rd on the grid, and let's hope he can make it a 3-rider scrap for the win.
Yeah, I'm genuinely excited for this race because we've had 2 classics up to now, and obviously for Toprak, he's been able to win both races. Bulliga's been right in his tail. Let's see if Alvaro can get himself into that mix as well, because we know what his pace is like during races. His problem is trying to come through the field nice and early in races.
So Alvaro Bautista right alongside them now, Razgatlioglu and Bulliga on the front row of the grid. He did make good progress early on in the Superpole race, and then was able to progressively get through on the likes of Sam Lowes, Danilo Petrucci, just to promote himself to the front row. And a podium, something of a relief after his crash in race 1 yesterday.
Yeah, I think certainly for Bautista, he knows that he has to pick up race victories. He has to put pressure on Toprak and Bulliga, and the crash yesterday had a big penalty for him.
Toprak Razgatlioglu, your Superpole race winner, ahead of Nicolo Bulliga. And Bulliga extending his run of consecutive podiums. So that's 3 Portimao races in a row now where he's finished second directly behind Toprak. Alvaro Bautista back onto the rostrum, and he and Razgatlioglu are the men who've done all of the winning here in Portimao, heading towards potentially a dozen races where it's only been one of those 2 who has been victorious. In terms of the other finishers inside the points, great job from the Hondas in 8th and 9th places for Vierke and Lecuona. What that does in terms of the championship, Nicolo Bulliga still leads, but now by 34 points over Toprak Razgatlioglu. Danilo Petrucci 7 back from Toprak. Iannone failed to score in that Superpole race, so he drops back into the clutches of Alvaro Bautista. Just a point between those 2, and Andrea Locatelli as well, who is tied with Bautista on 43. So Razgatlioglu, 2 second places behind Nicolo Bulliga, and for me, 2 victories ahead of Nicolo Bulliga, and for me, the key here is whether Toprak can actually take a 3rd consecutive victory and narrow down that margin to Bulliga, because if Nicolo Bulliga were to win race 2, suddenly, for all of Toprak's pace in advance of this weekend in Portimao, he would only have taken 3 points away from that series.
Yeah, it's always that question whenever you've got 2 really strong, consistent riders that have separated themselves from the rest of the field, is how do you make up that points deficit after a tough weekend? Obviously, we know that Toprak's going to win a lot of races through the course of the season, but we also know Bulaga going to win races. But we know when Bulaga won't win races, he'll have a lot of podiums just like he did last year. That's the big challenge for Toprak. You're up against a very different animal in Bulaga compared to Bautista and other riders in recent years.
And even compared to Bulaga last season, particularly until the final 2 rounds, where Bulaga was able to make a step forward. But you think about Phillip Island, he was able to win and then have 5th places, and Catalonia was able to lead and then drop back. So this year it's really important for Bulaga to get those 2nd places when he can't win. And the direct challenge to him here is Alvaro Bautista, who could potentially take points away from one, if not both of those 2 at the head of the field.
Yeah, and I think that's the big question that can be in race 2.
A look at the starting grid for race 2 of the Pirelli Portuguese round. No change in the top 2 spots. Toprak Razgatlioglu and Nicolo Bulaga lead the way. Alvaro Bautista climbed from 9th to 3rd in the Superpole race. He completes the front row of the grid. Danilo Petrucci originally qualified in 3rd. He's bumped back down to 4th alongside Andrea Locatelli and Sam Lowes. So Locatelli and Lowes once again on the 2nd row here. Van der Mark unchanged in 7th. Vierke down 2 places from 6th to 8th. Iker Lecuona, the only rider to make his way from outside of the top 9. He climbs from 11th to take 9th. That demotes Dominic Egerter 2 places. Bautista and Lecuona getting through on him, so he's down to 10th. And Remy Gardner loses that 1 spot to Iker Lecuona. He's down to 11th. Otherwise, the rest of the field from 12th place down, as they were following the Superpole session. So that means that Andrea Iannone starts down in 13th place. Scott Redding, who finished 15th in the Superpole race earlier on today, has got to start 15th again here. And poor old Alex Lowes has been severely penalised by his crash in the early stages of Superpole. He couldn't get through into the top 9 in the Superpole race. He came home 13th. He's got to start from the back for a 3rd consecutive race.
Yeah, Lowes had a lap deleted in the Superpole session for yellow flags being out on the track. That would have put him on the 2nd row of the grid, and his whole weekend would have been very different. As it is, it's a massive penalty for, at the end of the day, a small issue for him on that 2nd lap, but the mistake came in his first stint as well. So as Lowes said, it's one of those things that happens. You've got to try and recover from it.
Penalty for it, though, is severe in a race weekend with 3 races and starting all of them from the back of the grid.
I think it's a massive penalty when you look at how difficult it is for everyone to come through the field here. We've seen it in all of the classes where you can have a pace advantage but not necessarily be able to make those moves.
Toprak Razgatlioglu moving into position on the grid. Bulaga won all 3 races first time out. If Toprak does the same, that really re-establishes him as the man to beat again. The problem for him is he looked much more comfortable here in Portimao back in August, so it is quite clear that maybe the BMW's been pulled back a little bit. Ducati have found something during the winter. It's tantalising for what we've got to expect in the remainder of this season.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a case of the BMW coming down a little bit and the Ducati getting a little bit more competitive for Bulaga. But what's been interesting is Petrucci's looked good on the other Ducati. Bautista came through in the Superpole race, but the other Ducati riders have been inconsistent.
Well, 4 of the top 6 in the Superpole race means that they're right in touch, but certainly yesterday it was a very different picture compared to Phillip Island, where they were top 5 in the championship leaving the Australian round, particularly Iannone and Redding, those independent Ducatis down on the 5th row of the grid.
Yeah, and that was the question coming into this season, whether or not a rider like Iannone was going to find that consistency. On the basis of Phillip Island into this weekend, he hasn't been able to show that.
pit lane closes. It's time to take a look at the grid for race 2. No change in the top 2 spots. It's Toprak Razgatlioglu from pole. Earlier on today, he was able to claim his 20th victory with BMW, and he is already the winningest of BMW's riders. The German manufacturer have had scant reward in previous campaigns until their big marquee signing, and this is where Toprak gets to show what he can do. 2 wins out of 2 thus far in Portimao.
Yeah, and for Razgatlioglu, he's been able to show that he's not going to be beaten to the drag to the line. So for Nicola Buliga, it's about trying to find some other way you can attack Toprak, and plenty of riders have tried that in the past.
He's had the opportunity to lead Toprak and try to build a margin in race 1. It didn't work out. He's had the opportunity to try and pass him in the run to the line at the end of race 1. Couldn't find a way through. He's had the opportunity to stalk his prey and try and pass him at the end of the race. That didn't work out in the Superpole race. What can Nicolo Buliga do differently here?
That's the million-dollar question for Buliga and for Ducati right now. But you said it best earlier on. He doesn't need to win it either. He's got that championship lead. He's had a really strong start to the season. It's so difficult to claw back those points deficits. But for Razgatlioglu, he needs to keep winning. For Buliga, he needs to keep doing what he's doing, which is putting that pressure on Toprak.
He doesn't need to win, but if he does, he neutralises one of Toprak Razgatlioglu's best circuits out of the calendar and maintains the bulk of his championship lead. This is Alvaro Bautista, who completes the front row of the grid, and what a relief that will be for him. Instead of seeing 8 riders in front of him and between him and P1, there's only 2, but they are the big 2 this weekend, and that's going to be a tough nut to crack for Bautista.
Yeah, for Buliga, he doesn't need to win, he wants to win. For Bautista, he doesn't want to win, he needs to win, and that's the big difference between the 2 Ducati riders right now. But for Alvaro on the outside the front row, he'll have that opportunity.
The opportunity for Alvaro Bautista is going to be to stick with them, you'd assume, and then try and challenge in the final third of the race when he is at his strongest, with the fuel load gradually lessening.
I think Alvaro needs to lead from the front, and he needs to attack as early as possible. We know how strong he is on the exit of the last corner down the start finish straight. That's been Buliga's strength all the way through this week as well. So we'll see if maybe 2 Ducatis are able to be a little bit more of a fly in the ointment for Toprak.
Toprak Razgatlioglu with his 59th victory earlier on today in the Superpole race, his 22nd. So yet another watch for him, presented there by FIM President Jorge Viegas. Second row of the grids here, Danilo Petrucci, Andrea Locatelli and Sam Lowes. Petrucci, your top independent in the championship by 6 points ahead of Andrea Iannone, and on the grid here. Satisfactory weekend for Petrucci. Had a shot at the podium against Andrea Locatelli, couldn't find his way past in race 1, and then was denied by Alvaro Bautista late in the Superpole race. So just a little step behind podium pace thus far for Petrucci. Andrea Locatelli pulled off a miracle really with 3rd position yesterday. A perfect ride, made the start past Petrucci, held on from there. 5th position in the Superpole race shows there is some potential in that Yamaha package.
Yeah, you can see Tom O'Kane, his crew chief, down there as well. Locke trying to keep himself cool on the grid. The big challenge for the riders is, even though today isn't as hot as yesterday, track temperature is right up there as well compared to anything we've seen through the course of the weekend. So crews are trying to figure that out.
Sam Lowes completes the second row of the grid. He was 5th originally in qualifying, came home in 6th place in that Superpole race, and that was a great return to form for him after his spill from what could have been another good points paying position. So yet another top 10 finish for him, his 4th in 5 rounds this season. Liam Hodgins, who have you got for us on the grids?
Thanks very much, Alex. Well, I have the person you were just talking about, Sam Lowes. Sam, it's been a good weekend thus far, apart from a small spell yesterday, but you've shown great pace. How are you feeling ahead of race number 2 today? Do you think you can challenge the top 3 for a podium?
I think the top 3 maybe have a slightly bit more. You see Bautista came through quite well in the smaller race. The top 2 guys are riding another league at the moment, but yeah, these 2 guys on the same row as me, Locatelli and Petrucci, maybe 1 or 2 temps here and there. So if I can get a good start, stay with them and try and learn a bit and improve in a couple of my weak points, that's sort of the goal, and yeah, be there at the end.
Thanks very much, Sam. All the best for the race.
Thank you.
Sam Lowes with 6th position on the grids. And it has been another promising weekend for him. He'll be pleased with the step forward he's made. Of course, he was battling with injury last year that didn't help his cause. But after a strong start, Australia, Catalonia as well, the rest of the season was much more difficult for him. So good to see him bounce back at the start of 2025. This is the 3rd row of the grid now. Michael van der Mark, Xavi Vierke and Iker Lecuona. Van der Mark with 15 points from the 5 races thus far has made an obvious step forward compared to Phillip Island, a 6th place in race 1 and a 7th in that Super Pole race to put him in the same place on the grid here.
Yeah, a few factors against him in Phillip Island. Big race 1 crash, issues in the Super Pole race then as well. So scored a couple of points in race 2, but much better here and much more representative of what we'll see from him this season.
Much better from Honda here this weekend as well. Xavi Vierque didn't make, well, no Honda made the top 10 in the weekend at Phillip Island. Iker Lecuona obviously was out with injury, but Xavi Vierque with a brace of 11th place finishes, 5th and 8th in his 2 performances here. Was important for Vierque to hold on to a spot on the 3rd row of the grid after originally qualifying on the 2nd row in P6. Rode a solid race in race 1 yesterday afternoon, and just to make it into the top 10 is what his target will be here. Alongside him, his teammate Iker Lecuona. The 2 Hondas much improved this weekend.
Yeah, it's been a really good weekend for Xavi Vierque in particular. It's been nice to see Iker back on the bike after missing the opening round of the year and coming back from injuries. It was always going to be a little bit tougher for him this weekend, but Iker's been able to score a point in the Super Pole race, and always an important milestone for teams to do that during the 10-lap race.
Yeah, 3 injuries for Iker Lecuona, recovering through the winter after ending on the sidelines in the final round of the campaign in Jerez. Injury in pre-season, preparing for the season ahead, and then injury when he made his return at Phillip Island. So he was saying yesterday that it feels like all he's been able to do since October is 10-minute stints while he's tried to regain fitness. He's had a bit of riding behind him this weekend, 11th in race 1 and 9th in the Super Pole race. 4th row of the grid for Dominic Egerter. 8th place in race 1 was an impressive finish from the same position on the grid. Tumbled down the order though in the Super Pole race, and we did see Yamaha struggling a little more over the 10-lap distance than they did over the long runs yesterday. Here's his teammate Remy Gardner. 2 10th place finishes for him.
Yeah, and for Remy it's been a pretty tricky start to the season when you look at the fact that 2 crashes or 2 retirements from the opening races of the year in Phillip Island, 10th place in both Super Pole races, so he's just been on that bubble. And once you're outside those top 9 positions, race 2 becomes more and more difficult. Obviously Remy in the middle of the 4th row of the grid, not a big penalty for him compared to finishing in 9th place, but sometimes it really does have an impact on your weekend.
Completing that 4th row is Jari Montella. Now, unfortunately for Montella, he started the weekend well on Friday, but had a crash yesterday, so failed to score, and then was down the order in the Super Pole race. So he's got the same grid position as where he qualified, but he's got to make some use of it now.
Yeah, and for Montella, we've been able to see a really strong start to the season in Phillip Island. He's shown some flashes here as well. That crash yesterday was pretty costly, but for Montella, it's also a rookie season. You're trying to make sure you're able to come away with top 10 finishes and be one of those Ducatis in the mix.
Andrea Iannone failed to score in the Super Pole race earlier on today. His first non-score of the opening 5 races of this campaign. He'd been a front runner throughout the weekend in Phillip Island, those 2 podiums on Sunday of the Australian round. But unfortunately for him, this has rather been back to type, hasn't it? He really struggled here in Portimao last season, and it was only in race 2 that he finally found something and came away with a 4th place. But last year it was a retirement in race 1, 9th in the Super Pole race. If anything, it's been worse this time around. Axel Bassani starting from 14th on the grid. He climbed well in race 1 to 9th position, but he said at the end of the race that goodness, he felt like he was just riding around and waiting for everyone else to get into trouble, and he didn't really enjoy the fact that he didn't feel he could attack. So we'll see if he goes a little bit harder here.
Yeah, I think that for Bassani, we've been able to see through the course of the last 6 months since he jumped onto that Bermuda bike, a very different rider. This is the first weekend where we've seen him take a little bit of a step back. So now in this race 2, it's about trying to give yourself a chance of scoring points. If he can finish inside the top 12, it's a decent weekend.
Scott Redding was in the top 5 in the championship, leaving Phillip Island last time out, and all Ducati top 5 at the Australian round, but he's yet to score this weekend. Crashed with Alvaro Bautista in race 1 yesterday, and he was well down the field in 15th in the Super Pole race. That's where he starts here.
Yeah, really struggling, and I think for Bonovo, for that independent Ducati team, it's important to be able to make a step when we get back to Assen. This has just been one of those tough circuits for Scott. He hasn't always had the best results here in Portimao, and I think for him it's one of those circumstances where you're happy to write off this weekend and move on to the next round. But obviously the target has to be to come away with something in this race.
Yeah, potentially a slightly more challenging venue for Ducati as well. As we continue on through row number 6, Garrett Gerloff, Bahattin Sofoglu and Tito Rabat. Gerloff came away with points again in race number 1, scored 3 points in race 2 of the Australian round, scored 4 points, so went one better. His best result thus far with Kawasaki with 12th yesterday. Bahattin Sofoglu just 1 place behind Gerloff in race 1, 13th position for him, and completing that 6th row of the grid, Tito Rabat, who finished behind both of them in 15th place for a single point. Liam Hodgins down on the grid, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I'm down here on the grid with the Aruba Racing Ducati team manager, Serafino Forti. However, he is communicating with the team at the moment, but he's back with us now. Serafino, great ride so far this weekend from Nicolo, really challenging Toprak. What can he do in this race to get one up on Toprak? And do you think that Alvaro has the pace to go with both of them?
Yeah, for sure both riders can fight for win the race. And you know, this is the favorite track of Toprak, but we never give up. We'll try again. So we was so close in race 1 and Super Pole race, but of course our goal to try again to put our maximum effort for try to win.
Thank you very much and all the best for the race.
Thank you.
Yes, Nicolo Bulliger will be gunning for victory, even if it's just a psychological blow. But there could potentially be important points gained compared to Razgat Lioglu, who has started to chip away this weekend, hasn't he? But it's only been 5 points gained in race 1, the 3 points gained in the Super Pole race. If Toprak does go and beat Bulliger again and another 5 points gained, the gap comes down to 29. He'll feel much better about things than if Bulliger pulls 5 back here and opens that margin back up to 39. This is Alex Lowes. He's got to start all the way from the back of the grid. It's P23 for Lowes. As I said earlier on, climbed up to 13th position in the Super Pole race, but needed another 4 spots, and he didn't get the same luck with the attrition that we had in race 1, where he did climb into the top 9 in the opening 9 laps, but he then went on to crash on lap number 10, so has failed to score this weekend thus far. As I mentioned in the Super Pole race, Alex Lowes moving past Leon Haslam this afternoon in the all-time rankings. This will be his 326th race start in World SBK, but it doesn't look like being a memorable weekend for him. It's been memorable enough so far from Toprak Razgat Lioglu, but can he complete the 7th hat-trick of his World SBK career?